Okie doke.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I missed seeing you last week. Yeah.
No, it was weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, because being in Texas and then everything that's happened, or everything that happened last week was pretty insane too. Like, I went to a rally yesterday and did the whole marching thing.
Yeah,
Um,
how'd that go?
yeah, it went really well. I started raising money for an organization called Heart of Dinner. And they provide hot meals to Asian elders in the city, and they work with them. They work with them through social isolation because elders are more susceptible to COVID and the pandemic, and they also work to just kind of build community and help ease their anxieties with all the anti-Asian racism and hate crimes going around. Because it's the data, the preliminary data that we have is showing that it's more likely to be Asian elders that are more vulnerable to these attacks. So
Oh my gosh, that's so heartbreaking.
I know, I know. And it's weird because like I don't have an Asian elder.
Mhm.
Like I don't have a grandparent or a parent even that's an Asian. So it's kind of weird seeing like feeling a part of that kind of community because the only kind of Asian community I'm a part of are like the younger generations.
Right.
So, anyways, that's just how this week's gone.
Yeah.
How's your week been?
Um,
It's your birthday. Tell everyone it's your birthday.
it is the Bday. Super grateful for another year for sure. It's been, yeah, I think you said it best. I can't really say much about this week because it's been quite sad and traumatic, definitely for our Asian community and the broader spectrum on terms of humanity, in my opinion. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely prayers with that community. There's no space for racism or sexism.
Yeah. I think a lot of I think it was really awesome too how a lot of the people that were also from Black Lives Matter were also there and showing solidarity and support. Because I know that a huge issue in the past has been with white supremacy, just pitting Black and Asian communities against each other, battling for resources, for like just social and economic resources, where the ultimate enemy is white supremacy in the end.
Mhm.
Um, so just showing solidarity between those two communities as well, and just showing all of the intersections and overlaps between how this hate crime just really affected not only like it affected me as an Asian, but it also affected me as a woman. It affected the immigrant population. Like there are so many overlapping things
Yeah.
happening. So, and with that, I guess we can get into chapter 8 on behavior.
Yes. Yes. What were your preliminary thoughts?
So, whenever I thought about behavioral racism, I always thought it was going to talk about individual actions of racism and how to like call those out.
Mm,
So, that's what I was thinking. I didn't think that it would take it the direction that it did take it.
mhm.
Once again, can you just what about you?
Yeah, when I heard behavior, I definitely thought in terms of specifically school and how certain behaviors can be seen as specifically for Black and brown kids as problematic or aggressive when that's not the intention. So I guess I was along the right track this time. But it was, I mean, I usually say, what is my word? I usually say profound, which yes, but I also thought this was really enlightening.
Mhm.
the specific chapter.
Yeah, and especially since like your MSW field internship was working in the education type of a sector, did what Kendi have to say about like the racism that is supporting like racist eugenics ideas about the SAT, the GRE, and other forms of standardized testing. And then we have the no kid left behind policies that we grew up with. And then what was Obama's policy? I can't remember.
I know what you're talking about. I can't give a name to it.
I'm going to look it up, but what were your thoughts about like, because we already kind of knew as social workers that these standardized tests are racist.
Mhm. Yeah, for me this hit more personal, just my experience with standardized tests and my experience growing up. Uh More so thinking about my brother and how they're and just young Black boys in general and how it's okay. Like I have cousins who school was just like we're getting our diploma, we're out, right? Like school was not what they love to do every day, and how the weight of the race is on them. Oh, you're under, just like Kendi said, you're underachieving. Oh, this is so stereotypical of Black boys, and blaming the race as opposed to the system and the structures. And then with SATs, I remember not doing great on SATs. I mean, and I did awful on the ACT. And I remember applying to colleges. Unfortunately, when I was applying, there were a lot of schools that weren't taking the SAT or ACT scores. It wasn't a requirement at that point. I think at that point, they kind of understood the racist implications with the testing. And I knew it was racist, but I didn't necessarily understand why. And I think he did a really great job of breaking that down. It's just that people with resources and privilege have access to understanding how to take the test. It's not they know more than you, it's that they know how to take this test, which is a big part of the SAT, definitely.
Mm-hmm. I'm a terrible test taker.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I took the SATs twice, and my undergrad university took a compiled score. So like if I was having a really good reading day, they took that score, and if I had a great math day like 3 weeks later, they would take those two scores and combine it like I had taken that test all together. So I think schools are really starting to move away from knowing that standardized testing is not correlative is not indicative of intelligence, just like we know that IQ testing is obviously a racist ideal as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a huge issue that educators are facing is how do we measure success? And I think that's also just a huge question of how the country and how we as a culture and society measure success if our American society is based off of capitalist ideals, and if it is not judging the quality of life but how much productivity we put out. I think it kind of goes back to that, but how do we even start to solve that?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that he spoke about this because he comes from education and he's been the underachieving child who wasn't really feeling skill. And now he's this incredible person that he is and such a great educator. And so when he was talking about, okay, can they survive in their environment? What do they know about their history? Like those type of ways to measure success and measure intelligence was really interesting.
Mm. Yeah. I found Obama's policy. It was called Race to the Top
Yes.
in Common Core, which I never had to do Common Core.
My cousins are now doing Common Core, I believe.
I don't get it.
it's it's weird. When my cousin was explaining to me, it was the goal is so everyone learns the same thing, I think. And so all schools are teaching the same thing. That might just be my misunderstanding. It might also be specific to each, like it could be specific to each state, it could be specific to each county within states. For us, my understanding is that every student is supposed to be doing the same thing. So in that way, if a student moves from school to school, they won't miss anything. And apparently it is a nightmare based on what my cousin is telling me, who's like helping her daughters through school. But I haven't heard anything good about Common Core.
Like, for me, racist policies within schools, like growing up, the way it was framed for me was through economic inequality and public schools getting their fundings from housing and property taxes, right? And so all the richer people lived in one area, the poorer people lived in another area. I didn't really see the correlation of racial demographics broken up into that until like someone just kind of hit me in the face with it and like laid it out. And it was like, look, your city is obviously very divided between race. And why is that? Why is the affluent area, since I was raised by white people in white majority culture, why is the affluent area all over here? And why is this the nice school? They had a a bunch of transfers from the lower income school my junior and senior year. No, sophomore and junior year. And all of the sudden, my school's athletic teams got a lot better.
Interesting.
So that I always questioned that, because the school I went to obviously had better academics because we had more resources and did better on standardized testing, like we were saying, because of the resources. And then the talk around the groups and the schools were like, well, why did that kid have to transfer in and take up a spot on the volleyball team from a homegrown kid from our district? And I remember thinking, well, we're better school academically. People don't really do sports after high school. But if there was a chance for my kid to go to the better school based on their athletic ability, that's like, I don't think I would question it if I was the parent.
Right. Why would you not take that?
Exactly. And I thought that it was so interesting that Kendi really talked about racial exceptionalism.
Yeah.
And that like you had to, like, I don't know, because he mentioned about like pro athletes and Olympic athletes too. I don't know. That was
Yeah.
just me kind of.
I think you bring up some really good points. I remember AOC said we got to stop funding schools by property taxes because what it's doing is making people run away from each other. And I think she's just amazing because those are the words. Like you can look plain as day schools where I'm from and you can see the affluent areas. And I remember they were redrawing district lines that were already drawn so specific kids go to specific schools. And I don't even think they're trying to rectify that, but they were redrawing the lines. And so some kids that were at the low income school would then have an opportunity to go to the higher income school. And it was mayhem when I was in high school. I remember parents were upset. And it's like, dude, I remember one of my friends who was one of those kids living in those neighborhoods that would have had the opportunity to go to a higher income school, like bawling because people were saying such awful things about her and her community. I mean, that's where she's from. That's who she is. And so I don't know if people don't care or if they don't even recognize the harm, but like kids know what's going on and they understand that their background, maybe if they don't have the most money, that there are opportunities that they're not able to have access to. And it's really heartbreaking because education it's supposed to be about giving everyone a solid foundation to then succeed. Is it not really about that? Your reaction is telling me differently.
Yeah. It's, oh gosh. I mean, I feel like we could talk about racist education systems for like forever, for a year. I'm sure there was a class in our grad school that specifically talked about education systems and social welfare and the overlap between the two and the intermingling, and how social workers go into the schools and can be either great resources for the school or they can be extra policing.
Yeah.
So it's just wild. And like just connecting education specifically to behavioral racism and attributing certain behaviors to a race. Like whenever Kendi said that there is no race gene,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, dang. Because as a transracial adoptee, I know that to be true because I don't behave Chinese. People have told me I don't act Chinese. It's wild. And I also have family members and also members of my community who are also transracial adoptees, who are Black and brown transracial adoptees, and they're like, you don't act Black to these kids in my community. And I'm just like,
yeah, I think what I love about this book is that it works for everybody. People of color, non-people of color. Because I mean, I feel like I've heard you don't act Black high school down, like for a large majority of my life. And so I think he really does a great job of explaining that is not a thing. there is no behavior. And I love that he says that there's no behavior that is tied to your race.
Like, I love how he made the differential between culture and behavior and how someone could take that and twist it into a racist ideal.
Yeah.
And so, because we already talked about culture, and now that we're attributing behavior to race and culture, I think that the order of the book was perfect for that.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the quote because I think everybody should hear what Kendi had to say about culture being different from behavior.
Yeah. Like, was it the one where it said that because culture is it's a set of behaviors, of collective behaviors? Is that the quote that you're looking at where it defines culture again?
I think so.
Okay. I know where it is. I know that it is on one of the right side pages.
I know I'm 95 on page 95, which is a right side page. Anti-racism means separating the idea of culture from the idea of behavior.
There we go.
Yeah, I think that so eloquently displays the point you're trying to make, that he so wonderfully makes. They're different.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that transracial adoptees are a prime example of that. I remember growing up, people would ask my parents if I would act Chinese whenever I got older, or if I would grow up with an accent. And like it kind of baffles me because I was a baby whenever I was adopted. So it just kind of baffles me that they would think that behavior would be so intrinsic and imprinted on like how I grow up, because obviously I grew up in white majority culture and I don't act Chinese.
Right.
Like,
Whatever that means.
whatever that means. Like it just baffles me that, and we're talking about very intelligent people that had like advanced degrees,
Mhm.
whatever, what have you. Like reducing my Asianness to a racist ideal like that.
Mhm.
So just a just kind of from the transracial adoptee perspective, that's what I mostly got out of it.
Yeah. I think it's a perfect one too, because I mean, this was such a different perspective for me. Usually when I read, I write notes, oh, this reminds me of this. But this time I just like nothing reminded me of anything. It was such a new concept to me. But I think your experience so perfectly mirrors this.
Yeah, it's just and like I said, I'm not the only adoptee, transracial adoptee in my community. And so I would love to get other adoptees' thoughts on this too. I know that I'm followed by a lot of adoptees on Instagram, so I would love to know their thoughts in the comments as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um I don't know. I'm just like my brain's just kind of going. What did you think of Kendi's kind of, now that Kendi, in the introduction, Kendi like talked about their racist speech, and now that we kind of have come full circle in Kendi's journey to writing that speech, what are you thinking? And also we have like over half the book left too. So
No. I know. It's like how many more topics? Unfortunately, there are many more ways that he can and will go about this. But I mean, you're right. Like we've gone full circle, which is amazing because I remember in the beginning he was talking about his parents and how like Black Power and all of the things that they were. And so for me, it was interesting that he wrote a speech so based in his understanding of racism as a kid of a parent of two parents who really understood racism and sexism or and segregation and all of the problems underlying in our culture. And so for him to, first of all, I love that his friend was just like, you should write a speech. And then he did. And then when he wasn't there, she vouched for him. Like, wow, great friends. And
I
then
right.
it's just he was in the midst of dealing and internalizing all of that racism that he had to represent his community. So to me, it's so interesting that he's internalizing that, he's living in that, and then writes a speech. Further, I feel in some ways that speech had to counter with what he was feeling. Like it had to make him feel worse because I mean, I think at this point he still wasn't excelling at school. He still wasn't feeling it, like just enough to play basketball. So it's just such a, it feels so countering to me.
Mhm.
At a crossroad within himself.
Yeah. Like, especially whenever it came to school, because of that whole racist stereotype that all Asians are smart,
Mhm.
and how I've experienced racism as an Asian. People have told me, oh, Asian racism isn't as bad as anti-Black racism because, yeah, comparing the two, which you can't compare the two, first of
No.
all. It's all racist, it's all white supremacy. They would say Asian racism is good racism because people assume that you're smart. So going down that rabbit hole, another Asian racist ideal I dealt with in high school was the idea of the Asian fail,
Mm,
which is a 92 or below. Had you ever heard of the Asian fail?
I have.
Yeah, it's a fun time. So we would talk about like our grades and our scores in classes, and if we made 92 or below, they'd be like, "Oh, Asian fail." Um, yeah, they would talk about us not succeeding academically, being in the top 10% of our class, which by some, I don't know. I was in the top 10% of my graduating class, which I have no clue because I had a terrible junior year. And I think that also just kind of goes back to the economic resources. I was doing really horribly in chemistry, and my parents got me a chemistry tutor. Easy.
Yeah.
Like it was no question. And then kind of going further down that rabbit hole of anti-Asian racism in academics, like they would tell us that Mulan quote, dishonor on you, dishonor on your whole family, dishonor on your cow, kind of like as a joke. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm just like, huh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That was not okay. Yeah.
Dishonor on your cow is pretty funny though.
Oh man, I hate that people compare racism, how people experience racism. That is terrifying to me. Like, oh, it's not as bad. And I actually saw a lot of that at Columbia. Oh, because I mean they had such an anti-Black perspective, but whenever anyone talked about any other racism that they experienced, they got, I mean, in my opinion, bullied because they were like, oh, well, it's not anti-Black racism. And it's like, oh my God, that is awful. We have to have some form of unity, I think, where if anyone experiences racism, it's unacceptable. And it's racism, bottom line, because the fact that you can experience racism as any group, it affects all of us. There are different forms of racism, right? But definitely not, I don't even understand there's no good that comes from comparing racism.
I know. Okay, this might be a horrible example, but it's like comparing different kinds of vomit. If I'm going to throw up, my dog's going to throw up, your cat's going to throw up, it's all puke. That's just the first thing that popped into my brain. I'm sorry.
Racism is like vomit. So I appreciate it.
Like it's all vomit. Like that was just the example and the metaphor that popped into my head. I'm sorry if it's gross.
It's perfect. It's perfect. No, it's all disgusting. All of it. There is no, that might not be a popular opinion. There is no worse or better. It is all bad.
And we still have to clean it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's start with what's making everyone vomit. Let's start with white supremacy.
Yes. Let's start with the food poisoning.
Yes.
Going on that metaphor. Oh wow. That one just popped into my brain too.
That was very clever. Very smooth. I appreciate that. So if you learned anything from today,
racism is vomit.
Is vomit.
Yeah.
And white supremacy is food poisoning.
It's true. It's true. Oh my goodness. I love that. I think we're getting close to our 30 minutes too. Do you have
a perfect little bow wrapped episode? Yeah.
Do you have any closing remarks for this chapter, this episode?
No, I think we said it all.
I'm gonna put that in the caption. Racism is vomit.
Oh, definitely gonna be in my story.
Yep.
It's the food poisoner.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Well, I guess I will see you next week then, whenever we are discussing. Next week's topic is colorism.
Color, yeah. That's going to be very interesting.
I'm excited. It'll be good. All right. I will see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.